That night, I heard footsteps outside my room. The doorknob twisted. A voice whispered, "I like pretty girls who don't run." I was alone. The others were asleep, and he was trying to break in. Oh no. It was my first major skiing trip, and I was with my friends Angel, Amy, and Jessica. We flew out to Colorado together, excited for the adventure. We decided to rent an Airbnb in Snowmass, a small town right near Aspen Mountain Ski Resort. At the time, I had only been snowboarding once before, and that was limited to riding the bunny hill over and over. Needless to say, I wasn't very good at it. After arriving at the airport, we immediately hopped into an Uber that took us straight to the Airbnb. The place was a spacious 4-bedroom house with a large deck and a hot tub, offering a stunning view of the Colorado countryside. Since it was already night by the time we got there, we decided to head out to a local bar that first night, which happened to be a Thursday. The next morning, we Ubered to the mountain, ready to start our day. We picked up our rental gear at the resort to make things easier. The mountain wasn't too crowded that day, probably because it was still the work week. But by the following day, the place was packed. For some reason, I couldn't quite get the hang of snowboarding. I kept falling down the slopes, struggling to make it down without wiping out multiple times. After a while, I got frustrated and decided to take a break on the side of the slope, catching my breath. Meanwhile, other snowboarders, especially kids, whizzed past me with ease. Then this guy approached me. He didn't seem like he was much better than I was, but he still tried to strike up a conversation. He asked if I was okay, and started chatting with me. It felt like a strange time to make small talk, but I answered a few of his questions before I stood up, told him it was nice talking to him, and tried to focus on getting back down the mountain. This mountain was a blue run, meaning it was a longer slope to get down and slightly more difficult than a green. I stopped again a little further down the mountain to take another break. I really wasn't having fun. To my dismay, I saw that guy from before approaching me again. He was inching closer to me with the same struggle I had been dealing with. He stopped right next to me and unstrapped from his snowboard, then sat a few feet from me. He started talking to me about how he's not used to so many pretty girls like me being here. This was super weird because I had on a ski mask and helmet. My face was practically covered. He asked who I was here with. I lied and said my boyfriend. He laughed and said he saw me come here with all girls. I looked at him and said, "Do," really loud, and then got back on my snowboard and continued down the mountain. It's weird, but I snowboarded better than I ever had in that moment. Perhaps because I had the proper motivation to just get down the mountain. When I got to the bottom, I immediately went to the lodge and sat at one of the tables, calling each of my friends. Amy was the first one to pick up. I explained what just happened and asked her to just come sit with me. A few minutes later, I saw her walking over to me. I had already texted our group chat saying we should leave. It was already around 3 anyway. We'd been there a few hours. When Angel and Jessica finished whatever run they were on, they met us back at the lodge. We returned our rental gear and then Ubered back to the Airbnb. We all showered and changed, and then headed out to the village for dinner. We then went out to a few of the local bars afterward, and we got decently drunk. When we came back to the Airbnb, we all 4 went into the hot tub on the deck and drank more alcohol. After a while of that, we all eventually went to our rooms to go to sleep. I'm basically an insomniac, and I stayed up on my phone for over an hour scrolling on TikTok, even as I was still buzzed. I wasn't tired, and this was a very, very good thing that may have saved us. I heard footsteps out in the common area, either the living room or the kitchen. The Airbnb had wood floors throughout. Initially, I thought it was one of the girls going to the bathroom or getting water. But then I heard the doorknob to my door twisting. I sat up and was about to say one of their names, but I stopped myself because why would one of them be trying to come into my room? I instantly went to the group chat to text everyone and ask who that is. Nobody answered. They must have been asleep. I crept toward the door and pressed my ear against it. Faint footsteps echoed from the other side. When the noise stopped, I cautiously unlocked the door and turned the doorknob. I eased the door open as quietly as possible and peeked into the living room. My gaze swept from one corner to the other until I spotted a tall, dark figure moving between the doors. It was definitely a man. He seemed to be attempting to enter one of our rooms. I wanted to shout a warning to my friends, but fear kept me silent. I quietly shut my door and locked it behind me. I prayed that everyone else had locked their doors too. 4 girls and 1 Airbnb. Of course we did. I dialed 911 and whispered urgently into the phone. That's when I heard soft knocks on my bedroom door. I turned to see the doorknob begin to turn once more, but it wouldn't budge. I kept pleading for help on the phone. All the operator kept saying was that help was almost there and to stay quiet. It seemed the man outside had heard my whispers because suddenly he began pushing against the door. I heard the forceful bangs and shoves against it, and I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I screamed. "Get out of here," I shouted, followed by, "I'm on the phone with 911 right now." The banging stopped, and a voice on the other side replied, "Okay, sweetheart," before I heard his footsteps retreating. The 911 operator advised me to stay in my room until the police arrived. I cautiously peeked out the window, but the darkness outside made it impossible to see anything more than a few feet away. My friends had woken up from my screams. I told them all to stay in their rooms for safety. The police arrived about 5 to 10 minutes later, entering the Airbnb since the door was still unlocked. After confirming the intruder was gone, we made sure every door and window was securely locked before they left. Trying to sleep after that was nearly impossible. Of course, the thought crossed my mind that it might have been that strange man from the mountain who had been following me, and honestly, it felt like a real possibility. His voice could have been a match, too. After negotiating a partial refund with the Airbnb host, we spent Sunday exploring the area instead of snowboarding. That night, we stayed at a small motel. We flew home early Sunday morning. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you, probably our aunt. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, as a kid, whenever I felt scared, my dad would always tell me that ghosts weren't something to fear. He'd say, "Fear the living, because they're the ones who can hurt you." In my late teens, I came into some money after my father's suicide, inheriting what he left behind. When he passed, my parents had owned a cabin in Oregon, near Mount Bachelor. Since my mom could no longer afford the mortgage, And renting the cabin didn't cover the costs. It had been put up for sale. The cabin was scheduled to hit the market in less than a month, with the paperwork, with the realtor and lawyer almost finalized. During that month, the cabin would remain empty and no longer available for rent. I saw it as the perfect opportunity to get away and clear my mind after everything that had happened. I quit my job, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog, Midnight, and headed up to the cabin in my dad's car. The first 2 days at the cabin were peaceful, with nothing out of the ordinary. I spent my time playing in the snow with Midnight, snowboarding, and in the evenings, I'd relax with PlayStation, music, drinks, and smoke on the balcony. I had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut-in, aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVDs, PlayStations as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. The bottom story had the living room and a side guest bedroom, along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms, along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms, and always kept the doors leading into them shut. The 3rd day came around, and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog, playing games, and watching DVDs. That day, it was a pretty heavy snowfall, so instead of hitting the slopes, I stayed in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins, aside from these 2, were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days, I knew that no one was currently staying there. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had just been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. All right, whatever. The footprints led away from my cabin, and they disappeared in the snow towards the denser part of the trees. I disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around, and I decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to a listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in the bed and stayed silent. I was honestly freaked out, and I could hear him moving around downstairs, back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Shit, well, fine. I can't say no to him. So we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up towards the roof. After realizing I wasn't going to take him where he wanted, he plopped down and just stared into the darkness. It was a bit odd for him, but I figured maybe he spotted some forest creatures he wanted to chase. But honestly, I wasn't in the mood to chase anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed upstairs. About half an hour later, as I was lying in bed, I heard what sounded like hooves tapping on the roof. It was only about 6 steps, and I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a pine cone had fallen from a tree onto the roof, or perhaps a well-meaning forest animal was just running around. But here's the thing. The steps seemed to be spaced apart, like a man-length stride. So it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. All right, you know what? I'm a tough guy, and at the time, I considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes along with my cigarettes and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. As soon as I went outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Was it all in my head? What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between 2 branches. It looked really tall, like 8 or 9 feet, and it was really fucking skinny. It was squatted on one branch, and its freakishly long white arms were extended above its head, holding onto the branch above it, while its mouth was wide open with no expression. What the fuck is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing and stood just staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed. But later on in the night, I heard some light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. The sound continued without interruption for nearly an hour. Midnight just stared at the door, though he wouldn't go near it again. What was strangest of all was the feeling that someone was beckoning me to open that door. But at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head, urging me to stay in bed and not give in. I decided to listen to my dad's voice and stayed put. Eventually, I fell asleep, only to wake up in the morning. It didn't take me long to pack up and get the hell out of there. My family has a property in Vermont that we use for skiing and snowboarding during the winter. It's located at the top of a hill, surrounded by woods. The closest neighbors are down the road, far enough away that we can't see their houses from our place. Outside, there's a large shed where we store our snowboarding gear, along with various lawn tools like shovels and rakes. Whenever we're not there, we keep the shed locked. But once we arrive, we leave it unlocked for the duration of our stay, as we don't really worry about anyone coming by to steal anything while we're around. The actual house is pretty nicely sized. It's technically 3 floors, with the 3rd floor being a loft master bedroom, which is reserved for my parents and my siblings, and I aren't allowed to use it. This one weekend, I was heading up there with this girl, Melissa, who I was going to be teaching how to snowboard, as she'd never been before. We had a beginner board up there that she used, along with all the proper equipment on our property. Since it's on a steep hill, we actually made our own little custom slope that we'd sometimes snowboard or sled down for fun. So before taking her to the actual mountain, I suggested I teach her the basics on the hill. We put on all of our gear, and right up at the top of the hill, I slowly started descending, showing her the basic movements. When she made her first attempt, she right away fell as expected, but she was persistent and kept trying and getting back up. Each time we made it to the bottom of the hill, she'd get a little better, and then we'd walk back up and do it again. At some point, we both heard a male voice call out from the woods, presumably at us. It said, "Hello." We start looking around, confused as hell. All we saw were a bunch of trees and a white sheet of snow covering the floor of the woods. You'd think it would be easier to spot someone or something when it's just a sheet of white surrounding you. But nope, we didn't see anyone in the woods. I yelled out, "Is someone there?" Nothing now, just the dead silence of a secluded place in the winter. Melissa and I were slightly disturbed, so we walked back up to the house and went inside. I didn't think it could be the neighbors because I didn't see the driveway to the one we passed shoveled, and the neighbors further up the hill would have no reason to come down like that. I told her it must have been some random person going for a hike in the woods. That was the least scary possibility. Next thing we did was go out to my favorite nearby diner. Then we went shopping for basic groceries to get us through the next few days. Since it was a bit late now, we were going to spend the rest of the night just chilling at the house. We ate dinner and then chilled by the fire pit out back. At some point, we both heard the distinct sound of shoes stepping in snow not far away. I turned off the music for a second, but with the sound of the crackling fire, it still wasn't dead silence. By this point, whatever we heard stopped. I asked for her phone so I could use both my and her phones' flashlights to point into the woods. Again, like earlier, I called out, "Is someone there?" which scared Melissa. She has to go inside, so we did. We didn't go back outside that night. The next morning, I woke up to Melissa getting out of bed. I was still tired, so I went back to sleep, and when I woke up again, she was still not in the bed anymore. I looked at the time, and it was already like 9 a.m., so I got up and opened the curtain to the window. I looked out at the shed outside. The door was open, and I saw the breath of someone being blown from behind the door to the shed. I wondered what Melissa was doing out there. I opened the window and yelled Melissa's name, but when she called back, her voice came from inside the house, right in the living room. I got goosebumps. I kept watching the escaping breath of whoever was in our shed blow out the door. I yelled outside, "Yo, who's in my shed?" And a few seconds later, I shut the window and ran out to the living room to find Melissa watching TV. Or rather, now, she was more so just standing in front of the couch, concerned. I looked out the back door and saw the back of somebody dressed in black, running into the woods. I looked for my boots, but by the time I put them on, it was too late to chase him. I went to check the shed to see if anything was stolen, but it seemed everything was there. I relocked the shed just to be safe. I saw the footprints of that person lead from the woods to the shed, then back to the woods again. I wasn't about to follow the footprints, though. After nerves calmed a bit, we ate breakfast, then headed for the mountain, and we had a whole day of snowboarding. Melissa picked it up surprisingly well, and we planned to have one more day at it tomorrow. After we got back to the house, we cooked a steak dinner, then watched a movie. We didn't want to sit out in the dark again after last night and earlier that day. In the middle of that night, I woke up to Melissa shaking me. She explained why. Then she told me to listen. We sat in silence for about 30 seconds before we heard "help me" in a very long, drawn-out voice from outside. Melissa was in hysterics. Then we heard the voice again. I went over to the window, and she begged me not to open the curtain. I said I was just going to take a peek. I gently lifted one corner of the curtain to peek outside. I don't know what I was expecting to see except for total blackness. I cracked the window open, and a gust of cold air hit me in the face. I listened, intending on getting a better idea of where this voice was coming from. Then I suddenly heard footsteps in the snow getting much louder very quickly. They were coming toward the window. I quickly pulled it down and relocked it. Whoever it was already saw me, though. The knock on the window confirmed it. I looked over at Melissa, who was hiding under the blanket, making faint crying noises. I told her to just stay quiet. The best response was to simply ignore them and not acknowledge their presence. There were no more taps at the window, and the calls from outside stopped as well. The next few hours felt like a long, restless stretch of time without any sleep. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with us, and we finally managed to fall asleep. The next morning, I did a quick check around the house and discovered footprints all around it. It seemed that someone, or possibly more than one person, had been circling the house, moving from window to window. We decided to leave early, as it was clear someone had been watching us from the moment we arrived. I locked everything back up in the shed, and we packed up the car, heading back to Rhode Island. For those wondering, nothing had been broken into or stolen the next time any of us returned. So, honestly, I'm not sure what the person out there wanted, but it was definitely the same individual, or maybe a group, who had been lurking around since we first got there. Being in such an isolated place and realizing you're not alone, that's one of the scariest things imaginable. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.